Welcome to a new audio and video recording in the collection on post-growth planning. In the following, we are able to listen and see Anitra Nelson talking about degrowth within the course Critical Approaches to Global Sustainability Challenges at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. The recording is of 27th February 2024. It includes the first section and the last section from the classroom itself, which is a bit of a lower audio quality than Anitra's talk herself. I am Lamker, and I'm happy to introduce Anitra Nelson in the following first part. Enjoy the recording and take much inspiration from it.
So welcome to this special class session of Critical Approaches to Global Sustainability Challenges. And we are extremely honored to have Anitra Nelson with us on screen, joining us from Melbourne. So just after 9 p.m., very late evening for her. And Anitra will explain a bit more of who she is later. But basically, we met for the first time really already almost exactly 9 years ago in Melbourne in 2015. And she's been one of the most known and most famous people around degrowth, housing, eco-villages, communities. And I think she also calls herself an activist scholar.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Christian. So it's great to be speaking with you on what is my Tuesday night, but your Tuesday morning. And yeah, I live in a rural town that's 110 kilometres from Victoria's state capital city of Melbourne, the location of University of Melbourne with which I'm affiliated. Well, before I start, I'd like to make an acknowledgement of Jara country, from where I speak and live. Australia was founded on the genocide and the dispossession of First Nations people. So I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging of the Djajarawong people of Jara country. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. This acknowledgement of country, its custodians and caretakers, is relevant to my talk today. When the continent now known as Australia was invaded by people from the other side of the world, the very localised, interconnected, culturally rich and sophisticated, ecologically sustainable practices of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders were disrupted and largely destroyed. There were around 500 distinctive nations, 250 languages and 600 dialects in the late 18th century when the singular English language and capitalist practices of private property and production for trade, money and profits was inflicted on peoples whose descendants now only make up around 3% of Australia's population. Today, they identify with around 250, what they call mobs, with distinctive connections with country and cultures. Meanwhile, life in Australia, like the Netherlands and much of the planet, is typified by a standardised and totalitarian-like capitalism driven by economic growth. Growth as in growing gross domestic product, GDP, growing productivity, and growing profits. Today, I start my talk with key critiques of economic growth. This Eco Communities article reading for the session serves as an introduction to challenges facing us and responses which include degrowth. So I'll talk about what degrowth means and direct grassroots and prefigurative strategies for degrowth based on experiences in the degrowth movement and associated research over the last 12 years. I'll refer to some key elements of ecofeminism and global north come south activities as well in terms of degrowth. The major and fatal material critique of growth is that we can't have infinite economic growth on a finite planet. Human activities are estimated as having started to impact adversely on the planet around 75 years ago. If we look at the work of ecological footprints, the regenerative capacity of Earth has been increasingly incapacitated. All this is obvious in the causes of global heating. Out of control carbon emissions are just the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of the major global sustainability challenge, an ecological crisis of our making. This challenge is more political and economic than a matter of lack of knowledge or skills. In reality, we know how to conform to the ecological limits of Earth. We produce and consume less and do both more sustainably. Yet, if enough of us did that right now, would lead to a politico-economic crisis, because powerful and rich interests are vested in maintaining this illogical and destructive system. The major philosophical critique of growth questions antisocial, market-based practices focused on competition and growth. Why not collaborate and be satisfied with a simple life? Bullshit jobs are unsatisfying, destructive, and exploitative jobs within capitalism. In fact, we have little democratic control of what we do or make, of how we do the job, and where, how long, and at what times we work. So philosophical questions about growth economies focus on production for the market and highlight the domination of monetary forces, the alienation of individuals, powerlessness, and power over. The relatively new term degrowth arose on a long history of similar critiques of market economies. Problems associated with growth were identified early in capitalism's development by socialists such as Karl Marx in Capital, and as Kristen Ross shows in her short work in the 1880s, anarchist Kropotkin analysed the Paris Commune of 1871 to conclude with a revolutionary strategy of agricultural self-sufficiency for the future. Similarly, artisan William Morris wrote his utopian News from Nowhere in 1890, a novel emphasising quality over quantity, human-scale functionality over massive technology, friendship and collaboration over competition, rural sufficiency over urban dependence, ecology over money. Even Plato and Aristotle, 2,380 years ago, pointed out the inescapable challenges of money and markets. For money could always be used for gain, money making more money. Yet we live in a world remaking our economic and material subsistence to honour money making more money. Degrowth evolved as a theoretical concept in the late 20th century in the context of growth economies that have resulted in overproduction, overconsumption, and inappropriate production and consumption. Degrowth theoretical work draws from Georgescu-Roygan, Ivan Illich, Serge Latouche, André Gortz, Cornelius Castillo-Radis, and many more. Critics argue that the word degrowth inclines people to think of austerity and poverty. But you need to read the D in degrowth following its use in deconstruct, decolonize, and demilitarize, not just as decrease or diminish, given that reducing inequity and ecological damage too are degrowth aims. Post-growth is favoured by some, yet indicates reformism to many who prefer the down-to-earth degrowth. In the early 21st century, degrowth became an activist movement, evolving from France, spreading through Europe and then worldwide. Initially, activists targeted inappropriate developments such as airport construction and advertising. Degrowth campaigns continue to share interests with numerous other movements for social and ecological justice and sustainability. But degrowth advocates have always pointed to growth and growth economies as the source of inequities and unsustainabilities. Degrowth is anti-systemic, anti-capitalist. As such, degrowth has become a holistic socio-ecological movement imagining a post-capitalism based on respecting our humanity and Earth. While certain personal changes can be made by individuals, degrowth requires collective transformation of all the institutions by which we live. Degrowth is highly critical of green growth and Green New Deals because transforming to renewable energies in growth economies implies massive environmental exploitation. Degrowth argues for a radical reduction in production and consumption, more political participation and more diversity, especially in ecological systems and landscapes, along with a flourishing of creativity, care, and commoning. Degrowth argues for reducing and using renewable energy and materials. Degrowth critiques and adapts aspects of donut economics and circular economies, such as the degrowth donut, produced by the Institute for Political Ecology, and Kohei Saido's has himself drawn on a degrowth communism in Marx's writing relating to our current action. In short, degrowth aims to reframe and recreate economies that respects Earth's limits in order to achieve socio-political equity and ecological sustainability. The regenerative capacity of Earth needs to be restored and preserved. Everyone's needs must be met, neither more nor less. We need enough, and enough is enough. Instead of monetary values and relations central to growth, degrowth societies and economies would be oriented around ecological and social values. Grassroots degrowth activists frame degrowth in terms of achieving collective sufficiency locally. They argue that the most ecologically and socially efficient ways of meeting our essential needs demand self-organising communities, working with Earth as in commoning and producing as close as possible to our collective products' end use. Working with the limits and potential of Earth and people, they envisage a substantive democracy, direct action by people, with power distributed on the basis of subsidiarity. Activists work as little as possible in paid work for the growth economy, putting effort into living and creating degrowth economies. They walk, ride bikes, and take public transport such as renewable electric trains and trams. They repair clothes, reuse materials, refashion, and give away, swap, and pass on clothes. They renovate old buildings, preserving history and conserving nature. They collectively self-build using salvaged materials and simple tools that require the least non-human energy and embodied energy. They self-provision in terms of food and try to eat nutritious, locally, organically grown food. They pursue all these activities in as collective ways as possible. And these two books both have many case studies showing those kinds of principles in them. Collective activities include developing and living in eco-collaborative housing, such as ecologically oriented joint households, co-housing, self-managed housing cooperatives, or political squats. Productive organic community gardening and farming, community-supported agriculture, and food cooperatives develop practitioners' skills and enhance localised economies. They create maker labs and bike making, hiring and repairing collectives. Such activities are open to anyone wanting to try them, and collectives are open to anyone who supports degrowth aims and wants to learn more. I've analysed and written about quite a few cases of these collective activities. Clustered together, they can be considered what Vincent Legy and I speak of as degrowth formations, seeds to grow into a degrowth society. I and Paul Chatterton contributed a chapter to this collection on post-growth planning, on the potential of certain eco-collaborative housing, such as co-housing, political squats and eco-villages, to show at a small scale the types of co-governance, simple and convivial living that's crucial for degrowth. We used 2 different case studies. In Small as Necessary, I never use the word degrowth, but it's subliminally about the same process and uses a range of international examples. Degrowth is just one theme, one option raised in the post-carbon inclusion collection that is due out in May, where I've got 2 chapters that are wholly on degrowth. I refer there to Cargonomia, which is in Budapest, also the subject of the Scientific American article on degrowth, and the House of Change and Laboratory of New Economic Ideas that are both in Germany. Feminist perspectives within degrowth emphasise women's concerns and focus on particular approaches to degrowth, such as economies of care and commoning. German feminists, such as Maria Mies, pioneered work in the area of subsistence economies. Caring, empathising with, nurturing, supporting and servicing and loving is a central approach to degrowth activities and relationships. Care is not confined to care work or the care sector, but characterises all activities and relations in a holistic care economy, such as self-provisioning by growing and harvesting, making things and educating people, effectively applying Joan Tronto's caring about, caregiving, care receiving, taking care of, and caring with. Commoning is a central institution in a degrowth economy, combining shared use and benefit, responsibility for, and co-governance of shared activities. Collective governance, care and use of land and other means of life is in stark contrast to private ownership, markets, and state governance. Co-governance emphasises participatory power with and power to, following principles of equality and justice, transparency and accountability, and rotating responsibilities. A popular misunderstanding of global north-south dynamics is that poverty is only alleviated by economic growth. Yet, United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, Olivia De Schutter, points towards degrowth as a solution to poverty. In this The Guardian of 20th of March 2023, he states, and I quote, "It is quite conceivable that as monetary wealth increases in low-income countries, the situation of specific groups within them will actually get worse. Further, as in the slide, for people in poverty, a world in which a large range of things required for a decent life must be paid for and can be bought by the highest bidder is much worse than a world in which such things are treated as commons, democratically governed and allocated on the basis of need, or provided by the state as part of its duty to guarantee the welfare of its population. Tensions between global north and global south perspectives on degrowth centre on the structural fact that unjust and exploitative ecological impacts and socio-political inequities of capitalist dynamics are greater in the global south than in the global north. While degrowth has a clear role in the global in countries where overconsumption is common and where average standards of living and incomes are higher than in global south countries, degrowth messages are not as broadly applicable in the south. Moreover, in the global south, degrowth requires framing within struggles such as decolonisation and environmental injustice movements. For instance, everyday practices of Indigenous and other community-based movements within Latin America continue resistances that in fact prefigure degrowth ideas and practices. Global North degrowth activists tend to embrace concepts such as buen vivir, the good life, or living well together. In short, those who live communally with strong relations between one another and between themselves and Earth. In the recently published Degrowth Handbook on Degrowth, Ashish Kothari, a co-founder of the Global Tapestry of Alternatives, has a chapter on eco-swaraj, radical ecological democracy. He expresses concern that absorption of such global south ideas into the degrowth literature risks their integrity and the significance of their traditions and contemporary forms of resistance being misunderstood and subsumed and even being made obsolete in the process. In analysing and responding to socio-political, economic, and ecological injustices generated at a global scale, Ulrich Brand and Marcus Wisson coined the concept the imperial mode of living. This term refers to standards of living in the global north that arise from and regenerate poor social and ecological conditions in the global south. Brand and Wisson emphasise that global north standards of living and deleterious terms of trade result from complex institutional and structural factors, not from individual decision-making. Their concept was developed to raise consciousness of and to facilitate agency to address international inequity, exclusion, and unsustainability, all expressed in complicated contemporary crises, from climate, heating, through to absolute poverty and failed democracies. Brand and Wisson refer to many of the alternative futures pursued by degrowth activists and scholars, including holistic feminist visions of a commoning care economy within the term solidarity mode of living, with activities and strategies promising global alliances for addressing economic and political and ecological crises. All of these can substitute for the imperial mode of living. So, I hope that my talk has been sufficient to inform a discussion now about degrowth and its relevance to the questions that you've been asking yourself in this course and in your everyday lives. I'm part of a group working on degrowth in my local area. And so I'd like to know first off, if any of you are involved in degrowth or in aligned movements and you've got things to add or tell us about your activities.
Thank you very much, Anitra. Let's give you an applause for this.
Thanks for listening or watching. The course Critical Approaches to Global Sustainability Challenges is taught each year in between February and April by Ethemcan Turhan and Christian Lamker at the University of Groningen. Thanks to Anitra Nelson for joining this lecture, and thanks for her engagement as well as her willingness to share this video to a wider audience. My name is Christian Lamker, and I wish all of you a pleasant day.